Right, let's start again. So the presentation, the core of my presentation today is to report some results from the South African Public Relationship with Science survey. I'll just start by thanking the organizing committee and Mariana for giving us a slot to present these results. This is a study that was conducted in South Africa and was commissioned by the Department of Science and Innovation. It is a 4-year study, and there's a slight glitch in presenting the results, which I'll bring up in the next slide. I also want to say, and Bruce is not here, that this 4-year study cost us $500,000. So it's a very different, oh, Bruce, you are here. So I'll repeat my sentence to say the study that we did for 4 years cost us $500,000 and not the $50 million that we have. And I think it sort of highlights and amplifies inequalities, which is a hallmark of a South African society. But having $500,000 means you also got to dig very deep to try and figure out what matters for South Africa. So we have, as researchers, far more responsibilities in trying to understand different concepts. South Africa, as you all know and will know, is highly diverse and highly unequal. One of the things is that we have 11 official languages, and I thought as part of the cover slide to show you what the word science translates into some of these languages. Now, as I said, I have a little bit of a disclaimer. We've done this study for 4 years. The report is written, and because it's commissioned by a ministry, the protocol is that the minister releases the results. This was supposed to have been done in October, and it didn't happen. We're hoping to happen very soon. So I had to anonymize some things, but I want to show patterns rather than the full results, and just to ask that none of these results get shared, tweeted, or reported in any way. So to take it, what's it? Chatham rules, Chatham House rules. So, and I'd appreciate that. Now, this presentation, as I said, it reports on the results, but within this presentation, now I can't see this, I want to make an argument. It is about a survey to describe how the public views science in South Africa. And as I looked through many, and we've been doing some of these studies, and in general, we report on the levels or the measures of how much people like something or don't like something, and that's the traditional way of reporting. We thought, given our very diverse setup, that the description of the public relationship with science to include 2 dimensions. One is the level or the extent of whatever it is, of the view. And secondly, to look at variations within the public. And so this is the main argument I want to make, that especially for countries that are highly diverse, and more countries are becoming diverse, that we look to extend how we describe the public understanding of science or public relationships of science. And of course, understanding variations will also point to what kind of communication needs to take place for whom. So it sharpens that. And I will illustrate this by just using some data from the South African public views of promise and reservation attitudes, 2 perennial measures in the literature. And then in 2013, I wrote an article on the public attitudes to science, and in it we recommended how we should study this area, and we said that every country has their own fingerprint of the public relationship of science. It's difficult to compare, or you shouldn't, why should you want to compare this? And so I want to present a South African fingerprint of the public relationship with science. Now, in terms of just looking at the policy and legislative landscape, since 1994, the state has been very supportive of the relationship between the science and public. And in its white papers, the policy document, in 1996 and in 2000, and the next one in 2019, it highlights very clearly that the science and technology has it has dual challenges. On the one hand, we recognize science and technology for economic growth and development, for provision of basic services. On the other hand, in 1994, we started the country with very, very low education levels, especially in mathematics and science. And if you consider the architect of apartheid, Vervoet, I think his name was, and he said, you know, what is the point of teaching a black child mathematics? And this, I mean, when you look, sometimes I think as a social engineering project, withholding mathematics was a critical part of the just underdevelopment of the majority of the population. And it's a legacy that we still, and trying to overturn that and raising those levels is quite an elusive project. So raising the levels of science literacy in the country and recognizing the public, the full public, was a very important part of the South African government's enunciations. And again in 2019, in their next policy document, they articulated the policy intent of moving towards a society that's science literate and science aware. We want to be seen as a country that's rational and makes decisions on a rational, analytical basis. In addition to that intent of policy of science literacy and science awareness, the white paper also said, let's measure. So it has as an intention that let's measure what the public perceptions of science. And I want to just as a side refer to the relationship between research and academia. By the way, I was the principal investigator of this study working at the Human Sciences Research Council, who was asked to do this work. So, and it was this relationship over 20 years about institutionalizing the survey and to show how important this is. It will be conducted every 5 years. And so having the survey to measure is recognized by the state and will become part of the state's data sets. Now, in order to do that and to do the survey, the first task we had was to try and develop an indicator framework. What are we going to measure? And so we we outlined what the performance indicators would be and what the measures would be. Now, within this here, I just want to say that some of the measures are that which is within the literature in most countries. Sorry, Bruce, we said that you were not here. This results are embargoed, but this I think could be okay until the minister releases it. And yeah, so the indicators which most countries would use, your knowledge and interest, we wanted that, and the measures that go with it. The additional part that we included was environmental knowledge and interest because it's important. The issue, the measure of promise and reservation. In addition to most countries' measures of promise and reservation, we included promise and reservation of traditional knowledge, traditional science, indigenous science. I think you asked about that yesterday, Konesong. Indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge is recognized, and therefore we needed to also find the views in the public. It's not only modern science. Then we had the usual trust measures that are part of surveys. And in addition to the usual, the trust in scientists, the trust in information from universities, we included two other trust measures. Again, because of our context, we have a measure there on the levels, let me read it exactly, the transformation of cultures within science organization, and in particular, we're referring to race and gender. And what do the public think about that? And the last one is government's evidence-based policy making and the trust in that. As I said, government proudly says, we make policy on evidence-based. Do the public think that they do that? And so we included that measure. Then we recognized the importance of information, and people talked about that, and communication of information. So internet access and usage is critical for this in today's world. We looked at exposure to information, how much of information you receive, and consumption, in where we also thought agency is important. So to what extent do people actively look for information? It's important to extend one's indicators in different ways. Then the last two indicators refers to behaviors and actions and views. So the behaviors, did you attend a science center? Did you do this? Did you do that? The kind of usual thing. And the last one, we thought that it should reflect values. Do you have pride in the South African system? Because how we feel about this is very important. So we included some of the value indicators there, pride, how do you think? 3 minutes left. 15 minutes? I'm on slide 4. So I don't know. The approach to conduct the study was, we had an instrument with 200 science and society items. We used, it was a household survey with 6,000 adults aged 16 years and above, and we ran bivariate ANOVA statistics, multivariate regressions, and we reported the 95% level. We use socio-demographic variables of gender, age, socioeconomic status, educational attainment, labor market status, population groups reported, spatial location, and religious belief. Spoiler alert, religious belief did not influence any of the attitudes. So I just want to start looking at the results of attitudes, of promise and reservation. So we had these various items to see how the public responded to the different items. And sorry, Robert, we can't take the, for now. We will send the link to these reports as soon as the minister releases it. So the fact that science and technology are making our lives healthier and work interesting, 3/4 of the population agreed to that. And I'm going to rush on this because I want to get to the main point. We had reservation items there. In addition to the usual reservation items, we included 2 items that depicted inequalities. New technologies will result in people losing work. And in this context of automation, etc., that's what 2/3 of the population thought that was so. Scientific advances tended to benefit the rich more than the poor. 2/3 of the population tended. So this is the lived experiences of individuals. We created a promise index, 68, and a reservation index. Now that gives us the national score. And we thought, well, that doesn't tell us the full story. The story would be in the disaggregation and the multiple publics that we have. So we conducted a bivariate analysis using all the socio-demographic variables to show how the variation in promise and reservation was for different groups. On my left-hand side, you'll see on this that the promise and reservation sort of are similar there. And if you look on the left-hand side, with those that have the highest promise scores are those that are younger, higher education, students or learners, and come from the highest SES homes. On the other side, those with the lowest promise are poorer, lived in urban informal areas, only had primary education and are older. So then we sort of looked at what is the difference between the highest score and the lowest score. And this tells us the score variation. In this case, the score variation was, the highest was 72 and the lowest 62, 10 points. Now, Sahir asked me earlier if was there any surprising finding. I think so, because here we have this highly diverse South African public that irrespective of different attributes, the views of promise and reservation towards science was fairly similar. And I think it's this is my big kind of thing. It bodes well for our country in addition to our government of national unity. We focus a lot on differences, but we are similar as well. So we did this for the 27 measures, where we calculated the average score, we calculated score variations and looked at it. And then used that to compute the South African fingerprint for the public relationship with science. And this tells, I couldn't put down what I anonymized it a bit, but the pattern of the scale, the scores, is from a higher, on the left-hand side of 78, no, wrong one. Of 78 to much lower scores. So there are some measures the public is very positive about and others not so much. Similarly, if we looked at variation, we have that there are some measures. It is highly diverse, and I've called those measures differentiated measures. Again, spoiler alert, those would be those with resource-based differences. And on the other end, you see a number of the indicators where there's very low variation. So there's a lot, I think 2 minutes I should finish, thank you very much. That the score variation is very low, which means on these measures, as South Africans with our high diversity, we are very similar. And that's why I want the minister to announce that, because this is a political statement that he can make as well. It's important. So then in order to get our fingerprint with, and I'm quite thrilled about this, even if nobody else is, we'll see. The fingerprint of it, we combined the measures of the average score and the variation to try to say, this is our fingerprint for South Africa. We have here the 8 fingers, or measures, and then these are indicators there. I had to remove, I just wanted to show the pattern, the average scale score, and then to give you a sense of the measures with the different variation. And I think the addition of the variation tells us, as I said, the surprise was how we are similar in a number of things, and in other things that we are, the characteristics matter. And this then becomes the basis for which we'll do the study every 5 years and track the differences. But also, this is, as I said, with our $500,000, we had to dig deep to find out what will work for South Africa. And it does drive one, when you have very little resources, to think very clearly and carefully about what works for South Africa. And I think for us, score variation matters. But I hope also for countries that have increasing diversity, you might consider looking at variations. As I said, I've looked at the literature and I haven't found any. I'd appreciate your comments later. Thank you very much for the indulgence.